Whispers in the dead of night. It started with a caller single, chilling phone call that pierced the tranquility of my quiet life and plunged me into a nightmare, from which I couldn't wake. At first, it was easy to dismiss as a wrong number, a simple mistake in the dead of night. But then, the calls persisted, each one more unsettling than the last. The first call came on a stormy night, the kind where shadows seem to move of their own accord and the wind whispers secrets through the cracks in the windows. I was jolted awake by the shrill ring of the phone beside my bed. Groggily, I answered, expecting the voice of a friend in need, or perhaps a misdialed number. Listen carefully, a voice hissed, a voice that seemed to slither through the receiver and wrap around my heart with icy fingers. It was a voice devoid of warmth, of human emotion, and then, just as suddenly as it had come, the line went dead, leaving me with a dial tone that seemed to mock my confusion. I tried to dismiss it, to convince myself it was just a prank, but the seed of fear had been planted. Each night that followed brought with it another call, always at the stroke of midnight, a time when the world seemed to hold its breath, teetering on the edge between yesterday and tomorrow. The messages varied, a tapestry of threats and riddles woven with words that danced on the edge of comprehension. You can't hide, one message whispered, a statement that chilled me to my core. Another night, a series of disjointed numbers that held no meaning I could discern, yet seemed to pulsate with an unseen urgency. I changed my number, but the calls followed, as relentless as the tide, and as inescapable as the setting sun. I went to the police, but they found nothing, no trace of the calls, no evidence they had ever occurred. I was alone, adrift in a sea of uncertainty and fear. The turning point came one night, a night no different from any other, yet one that I would never forget. The phone rang, its shrill tone slicing through the silence like a knife. I answered, my voice trembling with barely contained fear. Tonight, the voice whispered, a promise wrapped in malice, look outside. Compelled by a force I couldn't understand, I approached the window, my heart pounding in my chest. There, in the street below, stood a figure, shrouded in darkness, a phone pressed to their ear. As I watched, frozen in horror, the figure raised their other hand and pointed directly at me. Panic seized me, a primal, all-consuming fear that drove me to action. I fled from the room, from the house, seeking sanctuary in the bright lights and crowded streets of the city. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched, of being hunted. Days turned into weeks, and still the calls came, each one driving me further into madness. I was a prisoner in my own life, jumping at shadows and flinching at the sound of any phone. I knew it had to end, but I was powerless to stop it. The final call came on a night much like the first, with the storm's fury echoing my own turmoil. End it, the voice commanded, a directive that filled me with a dread I couldn't articulate. I understood then what I had to do. I traced the call, following the digital breadcrumbs left behind with a desperation born of madness. They led me to an abandoned building on the outskirts of town, a place forgotten by time and shunned by light. The building loomed before me, a monolith of despair inside. I found my tormentor, a man whose mind had been fractured by loss and twisted by isolation. He was the mad caller, a soul as tormented as my own, ensnared by his own web of insanity. We faced each other, to reflections of human frailty bathed in the pale light of the moon. Words were unnecessary. Our eyes conveyed the depth of our suffering, the unspoken understanding that this, finally, was the end. I don't remember who moved first, only that the struggle was brief and frenzied, a clash of desperation and fear. And when it was over, silence reigned supreme, a silence as profound as the darkness that swallowed us whole. The calls ceased that night, but the shadows remained, a constant reminder of the ordeal that had unraveled the very fabric of my being. I was left with nothing but whispers in the dead of night, echoes of a madness that would forever haunt the corners of my mind. In the end, the mad caller was silenced, but the horror of those calls would linger, a chilling testament to the terror that can be wrought by a voice in the darkness. Whispers from the unknown. The phone rang, piercing the silence of my small, dimly lit living room. At first, I thought nothing of it. Telemarketers, perhaps, or a wrong number dialed by mistake. But as I lifted the receiver, a chill ran down my spine. The voice on the other end was unlike any I had heard before. A whisper, both guttural and chilling, that seemed to slither into my very soul. "Who is this?" I managed, my voice quivering with unease. But there was no response, only the sound of labored breathing that made my skin crawl. I hung up, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that had settled over me. It was just a prank call, I told myself, nothing more. Yet, as the night wore on, the calls continued, each one more unsettling than the last. The whispering voice spoke of things no stranger should know, secrets from my past, fears I had confided to no one, desires I dared not admit even to myself. With each call, my sense of reality began to unravel, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about my life. Who was this caller? And how did they know so much about me? The questions consumed me, driving me to the edge of madness. I disconnected the phone, hoping to silence the voice that haunted me, but it was no use. The calls found their way to me regardless on my cell phone, through the radio, even in the whispers of the wind outside my window. I was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. Friends and family grew concerned as they watched me spiral into obsession, jumping at shadows and flinching at the sound of a phone ringing in the distance. They tried to help, suggesting I seek the assistance of the police or a psychiatrist, but I knew in my heart that there was no help to be found in the rational world. This was something beyond understanding, a malevolence that defied explanation. The breaking point came on a night like any other, the darkness pressing in around me like a suffocating blanket. The phone rang, and I answered, my resolve shattered by weeks of torment. "Please," I begged, "what do you want from me?" There was a pause, and then, for the first time, the voice spoke clearly, its words slicing through the fog of my mind with terrifying clarity. "Your soul," it whispered, and I could hear the smile in its tone, a sound more horrifying than any scream. I was no longer alone. Figures moved in the darkness, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent as they advanced toward me. I realized then that the voice had been a herald, a call from the depths of hell itself, and I had answered. The realization broke me, sending me to my knees as I wept for the life I had lost. For the soul that had been claimed by the madness of the call, there was no escape, no hope of salvation. I belonged to the darkness now, a plaything for forces beyond my comprehension. As the figures closed in, their whispers merging into a chorus of madness, I understood the true horror of my situation. The mad caller had never been a person, but a gateway, a means of dragging me into a nightmare from which there was no waking. In the end, as the darkness consumed me, I found myself envying those who had never heard the phone ring, who lived in blissful ignorance of the horrors that lurked on the other end of the line. For them, life would go on, untouched by the madness that had claimed me. But for me, there was only the endless night, the whispers of the unknown taunting me with the promise of torments yet to come. And somewhere, in the depths of that eternal darkness, a phone rang, waiting for its next victim to answer the call.